Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to Finland once again, and that means that we're going to have a look at yet another beer from the latest Riku box. So first and foremost, a massive shout out and thank you to Riku Sanaxanaho, my Finnish beer mule. He's the one that's responsible for pretty much all of the Finnish reviews that you see here on the channel. He always sends me some very nice beer, and we're going to be working through these over the next little while. Now, the beer that we're going to have a look at today is from a brewery that has featured on the channel a few times before. We've had some really nice beers from them thus far. I think it's fair to say that they're best known for their different kinds of New England hazy IPAs, and the one that we're going to look at today is a style that I know they can do very well. It's also a beer that they released for somewhat of a special occasion, and Riku has told me this one is pretty nice actually. So yeah, needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one has in store for us. Quite cool that we can feature it on the channel, of course, as an anniversary beer. So hopefully it's another good one. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review. And as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to a little place called Naantali, which is close to Turku in the southwest of Finland. And we're going to have a look at what I believe is my fourth beer from Mallassepät. So this particular beer is called 5 Epic Years. It comes in at 8.4% ABV, and they're describing this one as a double New England IPA. So yeah, this one, New England Hazy, Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA, from a brewery that I've been very impressed with in the past. So at this point, we've had two New England IPAs from them, if memory serves me correctly, and the last beer that we reviewed was an Imperial Stout, which was also very nice. But yeah, certainly cool to be able to try their 5th anniversary beer here on the channel, and it's always cool to try different Finnish beers. You know, it's cool to support the Finnish craft beer industry because not a lot of people outside of Finland will know too much about it. So yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what we have. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Mallassepät before, and we will no doubt add more to that list at some point in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography-based tagging system. Just use the search bar, put in your hometown, state, city, country, whatever, and if I've reviewed beers from your local area, they will pop up. But you can also check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Finnish playlist along with many other things, and that will of course be added to as we go forward. But yeah, let's go on then to have a little look at my brewery notes, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Mallassepät from Naantali near Turku. So yeah, as I've mentioned to you already, Mallassepät are based in a little place called Naantali, which is close to Turku in the southwest of Finland, and this company was founded back in 2017. So the two men behind the company are Jaakko Hartema and Kim Kettunen. So Kim is the CEO of the company, and he comes from a background in IT, whereas Jaakko is the brewmaster, and he previously worked as an electrician before moving into the beer industry. But the two had both homebrewed for a number of years, and I think it was Jaakko that started earliest. He began homebrewing in around 2010. But when these guys started the brewery, they were still working full-time with their regular jobs and just doing the brewery part-time kind of on the side. But the original brewery equipment was apparently built for the most part by Jaakko, so a really homemade system if you like. But the brewery released their first beers in 2018, and they also opened their brewery shop up that year as well, so they were very kind of quick off the mark. But the premises itself can be found in the Muriko industrial area, and apparently these guys are producing around 65,000 litres of beer per year. As I've mentioned to you before, I think these guys are best known for their New England hazy IPAs. Correct me in the comment section below if I'm wrong on that though, because they have changed a little bit over the last few years. But as of November 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 135 different kinds of beer, and they do have a good few styles in there. But as I say, if memory serves me correctly, these guys are best known for their different kind of New England hazy IPAs. But yeah, like I said, we have reviewed an Imperial Stout from them, and they have been changing things up a wee bit over the last little while. But yeah, that is all I can really tell you about Mallassepät for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can, of course, check out the Untappd page to learn more about all the different beers that they've done. The only other thing we can really say about these guys for the moment is that the name Mallassepät, it actually translates into English as malt blacksmiths, and that kind of makes sense when you look at the symbol there. You can see the guy kind of hammering the malt into shape. So yeah, you can see on the side of the can here, Mallassepät. So the other thing that we should point out about this beer is that this is the first one I've tried from them in a can. The last 3 beers were all in 330ml bottles, but they've gone for this kind of Red Bull tall and thin 33 centilitre or 330ml can. But yeah, like we said earlier, this one is called 5 Epic Years. It's their 5th anniversary beer. This one has Spectrum Mosaic, Spectrum Citra, and some Nelson Sauvin, and they've brewed it apparently to be 60 IBUs. So that's pretty cool actually. But yeah, really nicely presented. This one, I think they've done the can justice in this one. They've pulled off some really nice artwork here. It tells you a little bit about the beer on the back. It says, in celebration of our 5-year journey filled with incredible beer and and amazing people, 5 epic years. Enjoy and have fun just like us. And yeah, it gives you a few tasting notes and things, but we will ignore that because the whole point of the video is to taste the beer. But plain silver top on the can there. And yeah, like I said, very cool to be able to review one of the, a Finnish brewery's anniversary beers. Not often we will come across something like this. But like we said earlier, 8.4% New England double IPA, Mosaic, Citra and Nelson Sauvin. In this one, we know all of these hops quite well. Mosaic and Citra, both American, both 14% alpha acid. Mosaic is going to give you that nice tangerine note. Citra is going to give you a good little bit of juicy mango, but also a little bit of a lemon limey character in a New England IPA. Nelson Sauvin comes from New Zealand, 16% alpha acid, big sort of white, green, grapey, gooseberry type notes. So to be honest, this one is a little bit of a classic old school blend of hops. But yeah, regardless, it should be very, very nice. So let's get this beer out into the glass and see what we have. And of course, a big congratulations to Mallassepät for their 5th anniversary. And I will apologise, of course, as well if I'm pronouncing this wrong. Finnish is just a crazy language. But from what Riku told me, I seem to pronounce these names fairly accurately, but just with a little bit of a Swedish accent. So I can live with that. I can live with that. But yeah, let's get this beer out into the glass and see what we have. So yeah, there we are. We have the entire thing in the glass there. Let me just line that up so that it looks nice. But yeah, anyway, this looks pretty interesting, I have to say. So first and foremost, the first thing that comes into my mind is that this is certainly not the haziest of New England double IPAs that we've come across. But before the head disappears, I think it is fair to say that this one is poured with about a 3/4 finger of a frothy, I would say kind of creamy coloured head. Mix of medium-sized and small bubbles in there, but 1 or 2 bigger ones as well. I'll just let you have a little look at that there on the camera so you can see it for yourself. But colour-wise, this one is actually leaning toward the amber side of the spectrum, and there are quite a few little bits of particulate matter visible in this one. It has got a wee touch of that, yeah, it certainly has a wee touch of sedimentation in this one. So I don't know how well you guys can see that on the camera. We are filming in 4K, of course, so hopefully you can see a little bit of it. There are little bits of particulate matter in there, but it looks good. 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there, and the head has incidentally faded away to just be a little bit of a kind of more foamy layer. But yeah, certainly looks pretty good. Like I say, in terms of the colour, it's leaning toward a very slight amber colour, this one. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour beer. Any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put into the beer will affect the colour as well, but when it comes to IPAs, you don't often have to care about those latter 2 variables. But in terms of appearance, rather than being a kind of New England IPA, I would say that this one actually looks a little bit more like a kind of American IPA. It probably could even pass for a West Coast, but it certainly contains both barley, it contains all three: barley, oats and wheat, which are the three kind of key ingredients of the malt base when you're talking about a New England. But it certainly is not the haziest beer that we've seen either from Mallassepät or we've seen in this particular style category. So this one is a wee bit different actually. I do like how this goes together. So this should be kind of interesting, but I get a feeling this beer might come across in the flavour profile as more of an American IPA, which is usually somewhere between the kind of New England and the West Coast, of course. But we'll just need to see as we go on. But it certainly looks very, very nice. Not too much in the way of visible carbonation. One or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, and a few little ones heading up toward the bottom of that now thin foamy layer. But let's have a wee look at the aroma and just see what we get out of this one then. Yeah. That's yeah, this is quite interesting actually. First and foremost, I would say that this beer is really kind of big and really oily, but you know, Nelson Sauvin, when it's present, you can always detect it and it just adds to that whole effect. But I would say that this beer, is, yeah, really oily, not so prominent in terms of its green component, but it's got quite a nice bit of sweetness and smoothness and things in it as well. I think this goes together very, very well. This is going to be quite interesting to try because it feels a little bit more sort of old school. But yeah, as I say, Mallassepät is a brewery that I'm kind of familiar with, and I know these guys do some solid stuff. So we'll just need to see how this one comes across. But certainly one of the more oily IPAs that I've come across in the last wee while. When it comes to the New England IPAs, for me, there are 6 different elements to think about. The more farmhousey, yeasty side of things and the rioting and grainy side of the beer. Those are a bit more common in American brewed New England IPAs. But when, you know, with all of them, you've got wheaty bitiness, oaty creaminess, barley malt bread, and also the sweet side of things. When it comes to the West Coast IPAs, you're looking for something, either it's going to be a little bit more oily and caramelly, or it's going to be a little bit more bready and biscuity. And I have a feeling this one might well fit into the more American IPA category, to be honest with you, and that's usually somewhere in between. So we just need to see what we get out of this one actually. But yeah, I mean, malt base wise, it's got a bit of sweetness, a bit of smoothness. Yeah, it's quite interesting. Let's just try and break this beer down and see what it has. So yeah, backbone of the beer then, as I say, the whole malt base in this one is quite oily, but you've got a lovely little bit of a kind of fresh white bready sort of thing to it. That's definitely in there. Nice little bit of woody character. You do get a little tiny touch of a crackery note out of this one, but that's very, very minimal for me. Bit, you know, more bread crust, a little bit of woodiness. You've also got that kind of white bready character in there as well. But above that, you can certainly smell a bit of the wheaty note in this one, just kind of thickening everything out. And yeah, that's certainly quite interesting with this beer. The oaty notes in this one are interesting too because they come across as quite thick, and you know, normally in a New England IPA, these beers are very kind of creamy and things. This one really isn't. So with this beer, you do get a little bit of that. You get quite a bit of density out of the oat in this one, but you also have that little bit of kind of sweetness as well. So you've got this oat, it's very slightly creamy, but kind of sweeter oaty character in there as well. And you've also got that kind of smooth wheaty note underneath. The wheat in this beer really acts as a kind of thickening agent. But this one, the malt base in this actually comes across, it really leans a little bit more toward the West Coast side of things than the New England. When we've had New England IPAs from Mallassepät before, they've certainly been more kind of creamy and wheaty and definitely more kind of straight up New England. This beer really is more like an American IPA than a double New England. I don't know if I would really have described it as a New England if I was Mallassepät, but we'll see how it tastes. We'll judge it on that anyway. But yeah, on top of the oaty side of this beer, you do get a little bit of that kind of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing. Potentially there's a bit of straight up caramel in this one too. And you've also got a wee bit of that kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing as well. So yeah, the way this beer goes together, I think, is very, Very interesting, and you can smell that it's pretty boozy as well, actually. So yeah, definitely just on the basis of the malty side of the aroma, it really comes across as more of an American IPA rather than anything else. But let's focus on the hoppy side of things with this then. So the one thing we should point out with this beer as well is that it's using Spectrum hops, which is a liquid hop kind of product. It doesn't use any, it hasn't got any solvents or anything like this in it, and it kind of concentrates the useful part of the hop flower, actually. So you have to remember that with this. So it's the Citra and the Mosaic that have that in it. The Nelson Sauvin, I believe, is pellets. So with this one, you do get a hell of a lot of floral character out of this beer. And remember, when it comes to IPAs, there are 3 different types of hoppings. Early edition hopping, which is within the first hour of the wort boil, that gives you a good little bit of, or that gives you most of your bitterness. In fact, when it comes to late edition hopping, that's the last half hour of the wort boil. Little bit of bitterness, but mainly flavour and aroma. And then dry hopping is after the wort boil. That is pretty much all flavour and aroma. But yeah, when it comes to this beer, I think this has had a little bit of all 3 types of hopping. West Coast IPAs, of course, tend to use all 3. New England IPAs tend to rely on the latter 2, late edition and dry hopping. But with this beer, the green component is actually quite deep. And that tells me that this beer has had a little bit of early edition hopping to it. So on the green component, you certainly get a little touch of earthiness out of this one. I think that's most likely to come from the Mosaic, but you've got a nice bright floral aromaticity to it, but there's also a bit of depth in there, so a bit of deeper floral aromaticity, some nice bright floral aromaticity as well. But then on top of that, you've got a little bit of a more kind of grassy, zesty sort of character. So yeah, the way that goes together in this one is quite nice. It does have a nice kind of big green component, and I would say the green component in this beer is a little bit more akin to a West Coast IPA, to be honest with you. So yeah, take that as you will. Let's look at the fruity side of things then, just before we taste this beer. So on the fruity side of things, it's definitely leaning toward that more oily character that you would expect of a West Coast IPA. So on that side, you do get a little touch of grapefruit out of this one. There's a more kind of oily, passion fruity character as well, and some mango. Those notes are likely to come from the Citra in this beer. But then, yeah, this is one of these beers that's kind of doing exactly what you would expect of it on the fruity side of things. The Citra is giving you the tropical fruit, the passion fruit, the mango, and a little bit of the grapefruit, the passion fruit, the mango. Then the Nelson Sauvin is sort of acting as the anchor. It's giving you that kind of gooseberry, white, green, grapey sort of thing in the base, but then you've also got that kind of juicier, orangey tangerine coming out of this one, which is of course the Mosaic. So yeah, the aroma out of this beer is really nice, but like I say, just from that aroma, I get the feeling this one is more of an American IPA. It's got quite a bit of West Coast characteristic as well, particularly the green component and the oiliness of the fruit and some of the sweetness too, but you can get a little bit of the kind of New England oaty and wheaty character out of this. I think this is going to be pretty interesting to try, to be honest with you. But as I always say, take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck in. But I think it is time to have a taste of this one. So yeah, this is the 5 Epic Years, an 8.4% double IPA from Mallassepät in Naantali, close to Turku in the southwest of Finland. Congratulations to them for their 5 years. And yeah, this should be quite nice. An 8.4% double IPA. Slanje, skål, cheers, kipis, and kitos. There we go. Yeah, that is pretty interesting. I'm going to say straight away, for me, this is not a double. It's not a New England double IPA. This one. This is more of an American IPA. I think it fits into that category a bit more. It's not creamy. It's not it's not creamy and smooth and things like that as you would expect from the New England IPA. It is more of a kind of oily and sweet sort of deal. This one. It's got a bit more West Coasty character to it, I would say, than it does New England. I mean, it's got the oats and the wheat in there, of course, which is one of the characteristics of the New England. But yeah, this is more of an American IPA, and one that leans toward the West Coast side of things than it is a New England. But that's just my opinion. You guys might disagree with that, of course. But what I will say about it is that if you just consider it as an IPA, I think it's pretty damn solid actually. It's quite old school, and it's nice to try something like this that is a little bit nostalgic, of course, especially for an anniversary beer. But I like it. But as I say, I would not have marketed it as a New England double IPA. I would have called it an American IPA rather than anything, especially because of the fact that, in my opinion at least, it really leans toward that West Coast side of things. But solid beer, no doubt about that, and we wouldn't expect anything less from Mallassepät, of course. So, yeah, the first impression of this one, as I say, it's quite an oily, malty, and sweet IPA. It's got a lovely oily, fruity character as well, but the green component is not the most prominent in this particular beer. But like I say, it certainly goes about its business very, very nicely. Um, yeah, what can we say otherwise about this one? Um, yeah, just big, oily, smooth double IPA, this one. Let's break it down though and describe it in the way that we always do. Middle third of the palate then. You can feel the base, the backbone of this beer has a nice little bit of fresh, white bready bread crust to it. So yeah, nice little bit of fresh, white bready bread crust in there. On top of that, you do get a little touch of a kind of wholemeal brown bready layer, but I would say that that's, kind of thin, in fairness. So yeah, a little bit of fresh white bready bread crust, a little tiny bit of a wholemeal brown bready layer, but then above that you can feel a thicker white bready fresh layer to it, which I think is really, really nice. Yeah, on top of the white bready layer as well, you can feel the really dense wheaty character coming out of this one. So yeah. So yeah, nice kind of dense white bready wheaty character to this one. But as I say, the whole malt base in this one, it really is. The more that I drink of this beer, the malt base really starts to lean more and more toward that West Coasty side of thing. So yeah, little touch of bread crust, tiny little bit of wholemeal brown bread, little bit of white bread. You can feel the wheat thickening it out, but then above all of that, you start to get the brown sugars out of this beer. You can maybe feel just a little thin layer of oat in this one, but it's not really. Um, it really is not that. Yeah, it's really not all that kind of heavy, this beer, in that sense. It's really is more oily rather than being thick and creamy and things. So like I say, I think Mallassepät have made a little bit of a mistake in this one, as in terms of marketing it as a New England. It really is more of an American IPA. It's kind of somewhere in the middle of the West Coast and the New England, I would say. But above that, the oaty character in this one is quite dense and but quite thin at the same time. The flavour is dense, but the flavour doesn't take up, it's not too thick a layer. But then above all of that, you're starting to get the brown sugary notes out of this beer. So above the oaty layer, you can feel, you do get the sweetness out of this beer. So in the dead centre of your palate, you can feel that kind of concentrated caramelly note. And as you move further out from that, it starts to become a little bit more of a kind of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing. And then, pardon me, beyond that, you do have a little bit of a more kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity kind of vibe coming out of the beer, which I do enjoy. So yeah, above the oaty layer in this one, it's really oily, and this is where you start to get all the brown sugar. So bread crust, brown bread, white bread, the wheat thickening it out, a kind of thin oaty layer, and then the brown sugary notes that I've just described for you. That describes the middle third of the palate when it comes to this particular beer. So let's go on to the back third of the palate and see what that has in store for us. So to be honest with you, it's really quite similar. I mean, that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you do get a little bit of that kind of white bready build up there. It's a wee bit more grainy, but still kind of fairly dense. But again, the base of the back third of the palate, a little bit more kind of grainy and dry, of course. Remember, more grainy, dry flavours come out further back on the palate. Above that, You have the kind of brown bready layer that we've talked about. That's a little bit taller and a wee bit more grainy, but still fairly airy. Then you've got the white bready layer, which feels a little bit more airy, but again, it's taller. So bread crust, wholemeal bread, white bread, and then above that you do get a bit more wheaty character, and you can feel that on the back third of the palate, the wheat has that little bit more, it has a little touch of bitiness to it. Then above all of that, you start to get the more yeasty characteristics out of the beer. So when it comes to the yeasty side of this one, I would say it's like quite an airy white bread, but at the same time it's got a little touch of honeycomb to it. There's a little bit of woodiness in there. It's yeah, it really is quite nice how that side of things goes together with this particular beer. But definitely on the back third of the palate, you can feel the flavour is taller, and then as you come further forward, it just condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, the way that this beer goes about its business on the malty side of things is really nice. But as I say, they're calling this one a double New England IPA just based on the malt base and the yeasty characteristics in this one. I kind of disagree with that. You could say it's an American IPA, but it's an American IPA that really leans toward the more malty and oily West Coast side of things. That's what I would say about this one. You can argue about style categories all day. That's not meant to be, knocking this beer, giving it bad press or whatever. But I really think this one, it really is more American or West Coast rather than New England. I would not have called this beer a New England IPA if I was at Mallassepät. But anyway, on to the hoppy side of things then. The hoppy side of this beer, for me, green component, back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness in there, but as you move further forward, you start to get more of a actually get quite a bit of deep dank character out of this one. As I've said many a time in these videos, early edition hopping is the one that's going to give you the bitterness. You can tell from this beer, just from the flavour of this beer, you've got a nice little bit of deep dankness to this one. So that tells you there is a little bit of early edition hopping here, and it works. So you can feel as you come further forward along the sides of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of floral aromaticity there. There is a bit of dankness to it, but as you reach the front corners of the palate, it's a little bit brighter, a little bit more kind of spicy and things, I would say. But then, yeah, round the front curve of the tongue, you've got a little bit of a more kind of floral, and you've got a little bit of floral character there, but you've also got a wee touch of a kind of zesty grassiness as well, which I really do like. So that gets a big thumbs up from me too. But nice big oily green component to this one, which I certainly do like. Yeah, in terms of I don't think there's anything else we need to say about the green component of this one, but let's look at the front third of the palate and the fruity side of the beer. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again, you get a little bit of that kind of bready build up in there. It's almost a little bit kind of oaty and thick, but the base of the front third of your palate there's a little bit of the bread crust in there and a wee mix of the white and brown bread, but on top of that, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy, fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. And, we know these three hops in this beer quite well. It really is showing you everything you would expect of these three. So let's just break that down for you a wee bit more. So, absolutely, over the back half and front half of the front third of your palate with this beer, it's the Nelson Sauvin. You've got that kind of white, green grapey, gooseberry type note. That's forming the backbone of the beer. But above that, on the back half of the front third of your palate, you're getting a bit of the grapefruit, a bit of the passion fruit, and then the more oily kind of mango-y type flavour from the citra. That is definitely coming out in this one. But as I say, you've got Nelson Sauvin acting as the anchor, the base plate of this beer. Yeah, grapefruit, passion fruit, mango. Then as you move into the front half of the front third of your palate with this beer, you have a more you get the mosaic coming out of this one. You've got that big, juicy, orangey, tangerine quality coming out of it. And it works, as I say, it works very, very well. So this beer gets a big thumbs up from me in that sense. Yeah, I like how this goes together. The fruity side of things is certainly more oily, and again, this is something that makes me say this beer is really more of an American IPA that is quite West Coast leaning. So it's quite different from the other two IPAs that I've had from Mallassepät in the past. They were definitely, you know, New England hazies. This one is really more of a West Coast rather than anything else. But in terms of, you know, we can argue about style categories all day. The main question for me is this a good beer? The answer to this is yes. It's a solid, you know, more West Coasty leaning, American IPA. This one, very very nice actually. I can feel the booze going to my head with this beer a little bit because at 8.4%, it is fairly heavy, and yeah, it does the job. It certainly does the job. But more of it's kind of old school in a way as well. So we know this hop combination quite well, Mosaic Citra and Nelson Sauvin. You can't go wrong with it, and they certainly haven't gone wrong with it in this particular beer. So yeah, lovely beer this one, but I certainly wouldn't have called it a double New England IPA, more of an American IPA this one. But again, another very good beer from Mallassepät. Let's round off this review with a wee quick look at the mouthfeel. So, as I've said, this beer for me, it's kind of full-bodied, bottom end of full-bodied for me, maybe top end of mid-bodied, you can argue about that. Carbonation is very smooth, more of an oily mouthfeel. It tells you on the can this one is 60 IBUs. I have to be honest and say I wouldn't have picked that up. I would have thought it was about 40 or 50-ish. I don't find this beer overly bitter. We've said the malt base has a bit of graininess to it, a bit of smoothness, but quite a lot of oiliness, which suits the beer, and the fruity character as well is very, very oily. I've said quite explicitly in this review that this is more of an American IPA to me that is quite West Coast leaning rather than New England. I think, you know, I think they've made a wee bit of a mistake with the marketing of this one. I would have called it an American IPA rather than a New England. But regardless of what style bracket actually is, it's a very solid beer, and I wouldn't expect anything less of Mallassepät. So quite a nice one for them to put out for their 5th anniversary beer. I think that's certainly fair to say. But I think we can leave it at that for this review. Another very, very solid beer from these guys, and I look forward to trying a few different styles from them in the near future. But yeah, let's leave it there. So this one was the 5 Epic Years, an 8.4% IPA, or double IPA we should say, from Mallassepät in Naantali near Turku in the southwest of Finland. Really nice beer, and certainly cool to review one of their anniversary beers for you here on Rampant Lion Reviews. So once again, thank you to you guys that have watched the video. Thank you for all your support. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Mallassepät as well, and we will definitely return to these guys in the future. But in the meantime, check out my social media, check out their social media, try some of Mallassepät's beers, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Sláinte, skål, and cheers. 5 Epic Years, 8.4% ABV from Mallassepät in Finland. Kipis and kitos.